Hey guys, I want to talk about gold, right? Gold versus Bitcoin. Let's talk about that. And this is something that's come up again. This is my field. I talk about payments a lot. I talk about fintech a lot. Clearly, because I'm the CEO of Orukka. Orukka is a smart payment ring, allows you tap to pay. Okay, so you can tap to pay with your ring, tap to pay with your bracelet. So this is a bracelet. Actually, it looks beautiful, but it's actually a payment bracelet. So it's basically your bank on your wrist or your bank on your fingers. That's what we do. That's our world. That's my world. Okay. I'm not a celebrity, not influencer, clearly as you can tell. But when I have a second just between meetings or just while traveling, I record, and I talk to my customers. Lighting is very good in this room, by the way, but there's nothing fancy. Just recording from my phone. But what I want to talk about today actually is Bitcoin. These are two big dogs, right? Bitcoin and gold. Yeah. And it's come to my attention clearly because our rings accepts cards, accepts Apple Pay, accepts credit card, banks. Okay, we work with about 500 banks across 55 countries. I suppose the main thing is also Bitcoin. So we're starting to look at Bitcoin and see how users can actually top up with Bitcoin on this and then pay. So effectively, you can now pay with Bitcoin. And then clearly, people are going to think of that and think of gold as well, right? Because everyone argues that Bitcoin is digital gold. There's always that argument between Bitcoin and gold, okay? And it's always like two classic people, right? Or like I look at it as a grandpa, which is gold, arguing with a grandchild, which is Bitcoin. But a very powerful grandchild. Bitcoin is very powerful. So the question now becomes, who's best? Who wins in this battle? Okay, it's a huge battle, believe it or not. It's a battle between a grandpa that is very, very strong, right? So I'm going to say grandpa, in this case, gold. Gold is very strong. Gold has been around for over 2,500 years. That's 2005. Gold has been through a lot. Started as nothing, started as a shiny metal. And believe it or not, people argue about currency. So it's the same thing. Salt used to be currencies. And there's a plastic here. Plastic could have been a currency. Grains used to be currencies. There are quite a few things that were currencies all across the years. But, gold shone out because it was scarce. Metal, shiny metal, silver is also scarce, right? But gold stood out between silver. Even though silver is much more precious, silver is used a lot more in the industry. It's much more volatile. It's much more the utility is crazy in terms of the numbers that you can do. Gold less so, right? So gold is useful, but not as useful as silver. But people gravitated towards gold because it was really, really shiny, okay? And it was one of those things that was scarcer, at least in nature, is scarcer than silver. So people started using that a lot, right? And it's been around for 2,500 years. It's gone through trials and tribulations. It's gone through ups and downs. But I want to talk about why these two, right? That's important. So why gold, why silver? And I'm impartial to this. I'm not pro gold, I'm not pro silver. If you can't tell, we do payments. So that means you can pay with silver with this, you can pay with gold if you wanted to. But we're working towards that. So if I have enough customers across 55 countries who come to me and say, hey, Paps, we want to be able to top up our payment rings and bracelets with gold, we will make it happen, right? If we have enough customers really that clamor for it, we do it. And we're not owing anybody, right? So if you see here, we're not some big VC firm. We're bankers, so we help, right? And it's not really about the money as well. We've been running losses for a while, but I did this because I really want to do it. It's my passion, right? I love wearables. I love rings. And then when rings and payments comes together, that's me, right? I've been working in banking for over 20 years. So I wanted to build something. So we're building something. And my happiness is just when people use our rings, as small as we are, we're in 55 countries, which is crazy. No adverts, by the way. So this is the advert we're doing, which is crazy. Some people come to me and say, why have I not heard about this? Well, you have now. No, which is always the case. So people are surprised when they just hear about it and they haven't seen it on the TV, they haven't seen it on the radio. That's because we can't afford to, right? If we do that, then the price of the rings go up. So people have to start thinking about that. Advertising comes at a cost. So when you hear about something in the Super Bowl, NFL Super Bowl ads, that's already bad because those guys have spent close to 100 million or whatever to advertise. Guess who's going to pay? You. Customers are going to pay. If we haven't advertised as crazy as we have and we're still building, right, and we're still growing, this is the best time to come in and use, right? It's not an investment. You're using it, right? You're not investing in anything. But I say that because, it's important to see that we're in between here, right? So we don't care about Bitcoin or gold, but in the middle here. So I'll talk about why both, right? Why both are shining. Bitcoin and gold are shining because they're both scarce. Yeah. You can't just produce Bitcoin tomorrow. And we know this because no matter, I think there are a few people arguing that, who came up with Bitcoin? Was it the CIA? Was it Jeffrey Epstein? There were a few people coming out there to find out who created it, right? Which is true. It's the same argument with who created emails, right? You can argue that who created the email? No one knows, but we use it. because it's open source. We can see it. Yeah. We wish we knew, right? You could spend some time investigating who used it, right? But the truth is, once it's invented and it's out there, people are using it. That's the same thing with Bitcoin. It's out there. People can see it. You can see the code. If you go in and see all the original code, you can still see the code, which is crazy to think about. And people have taken it out and forked it and created their own version, like Ethereum, Polygon, all these guys have created their own version, okay? But Bitcoin still stands there because it's the original, right? These guys can produce anything they want tomorrow. Ethereum, I think the founders of Ethereum own about 30% of the supply, so they can take it up and down if they wanted to. They can issue more Ethereum if they wanted to. Everybody knows the founder, and if the founder goes tomorrow, what's going to happen to that? Which is a risk there, right? Everybody talks about, they don't like, Peter Thiel. They don't like, what's the other guy's name in Palantir, right? That they're taking over the world. But those guys actually run Ethereum as well. So if you don't get out of there, what are you going to do? I'm not against them, by the way. So my point is, if you're worried about who founded something, right, then you're never going to use it, right? I mean, I'm in a hotel room here. Who slept on this bed before me? I don't know. That's one of the scariest things. I think my wife is always complaining about that. She doesn't like hotel room because of that. She doesn't know what's happened on the bed beforehand. If you do that, then you're always going to be on the edge. And at what point do you stop giving up and saying, okay, there's a product here, I can see it, it works, we're going to use it. So that's Bitcoin for you. So Bitcoin, I can tell you right now, is there, it's open source, you can see it. We know there's 21 million of that in supply. That's scarce by definition. Very scarce. Same thing with Bitcoin. Same thing with gold. Gold, on the other hand, I think people try to mine gold and it's incredibly tough to mine. Yeah, you can see the mines and you can see, I think I tried those days. I tried, when I was working in banking. We looked at investing in a mine. And I can tell you all the, working in Switzerland, all the investments that we tried to go into, and I looked at the portfolio, the percentage return is horrible. Miners make a loss every time where they're trying to look for gold. And it's very, very scarce to find. And we know about, blood gold and blood diamond and how tough it is to just mine and go down to earth. So it's scarce by definition, right? And that's why in terms of supply of mining, I think it's very, very low. We have about, I think, 1% per annum of gold that's mined, 1 to 2% per annum. There's always talk about, they could discover gold tomorrow on a meteor, on another planet. Perhaps so, but we still haven't. Until we do that, gold is still scarce. So what you're left with are two very, very strong commodities, they're technically commodities, very, very strong commodities that that's hard to mine, scarce, provably scarce. When something is scarce, the next thing people like, why they like it, is the fact that people can manipulate it. So governments can go in and bring more of that. So we talk about politics a lot here. So, call two random countries, USA and Russia. They both dislike each other. Okay, they dislike each other, but guess what? Both of them can introduce as much US dollar and Russian ruble as possible. Okay, they can both argue tomorrow. They can both try and force different prices on their export and import to strengthen or weaken their currency to their advantage. But you can't do that with Bitcoin and gold. That's why investors look at that. Yeah, so that's why gold and Bitcoin will remain there forever. So people call, Bitcoin digital gold because, they're both seen as gold because they're both seen as sort of sovereign, right? Sovereign means that, again, the big word, just means no one can influence it, right? They're on their own. Yeah, and they've got value on their own. So that's why an investor, no matter where you're at, you want to try and invest in gold and invest in Bitcoin. Now, here's where I started to part a little bit, right? I gravitate towards Bitcoin for this, right? And it's on my fingers, right? Just so you know. Right now, I can tell you can't spend gold. The worst case scenario, you can always find a way, if you're in trouble, right? There's war in the country. You can go ahead and actually pay with a bar of gold, okay? And you get away with it. That's the worst case scenario. Bitcoin, on the other hand, was introduced for P2P. It instantly settles, unlike gold. It instantly transfers from one person to the other. You can walk around with million worth of Bitcoin in your pockets. You can't walk around with million worth of gold in your pockets. In fact, at the customs, you will be stopped. At customs, if you walked around with a bar of gold this big, they'll stop you up and say, hey, where'd you get this gold from, right? And you would have had to declare it. If you don't declare it, it's going to be seized. Gold will be, but Bitcoin is not. So that's where the advantage starts to come in between one form of digital gold versus the virtual physical gold, right? The digital gold, you can move around with it. You can spend it, right? We allow you, so we're working actively towards that. In short, by the time you watch this video, we might have gone live, or by the time you get to this video, then we'd have gone live and you would have seen that we spend Bitcoin every day with your ring. You can tap to pay. So you can go into another country and pay with Bitcoin, right? Already, I think we're working with a team in South Africa to do that. South Africans are ahead of the curve with this one. So we're working with a team in South Africa to get this done. I don't want to mention the company's name, but we're working on that actively. So by the time you watch this video, you can spend Bitcoin in South Africa. You can spend Bitcoin in Europe and USA. We're looking at that as well. So my point is, you can now spend Bitcoin, right? So that the excuse that, oh, you can't spend Bitcoin is out. That means Bitcoin is now becoming stronger. Yeah, so that's where I see it, right? So in terms of utility, using it daily when there's no war. If there's war, you're back to gold, right? If there's war, you have to use gold. But if you have Bitcoin, and then you want to spend it, you can spend it now. So that's where the advantage comes in. The disadvantage, on the other hand, with gold is that you can see gold, right? So the advantage of gold is that you can see it, you can touch it. Bitcoin is electronic, so there's always that pain, especially people who love to touch, see things. I remember, again, I worked in Switzerland for about 10, 12 years, and before then, I didn't mind gold, right? I was just like, okay, whatever, shiny metal. However, I remember the first time I walked into Credit Suisse and I saw the bar, like, you can go down the floor, right? It's not, okay, yeah, if you walk in Credit Suisse, it's closed now, by the way. But if you walked in Credit Suisse, you could go down to like this 12th, 13th floor below ground, and you could see the vaults of golds sitting there. That's the first time you actually, like, almost, we're primitive animals. That's where because your head just becomes woozy from the gold, right? You just see it and you know this value, that you understand why gold was used as money. Right? And I bought, so for my kids, I started buying little tiny golds whenever they lose their teeth. I buy them tiny gold. Instead of giving them cash, I buy them tiny gold. And I can tell you, when we touch it and I touch it, I'm like, oh, this is still something. Even though it's very tiny, you still feel it. So I recommend it. I think you should go buy gold. I think you should touch it. I think you should feel it. As an investment, it's a different conversation. I don't like giving investment advice, either or Bitcoin or gold. I don't give investment advice for good reason, because I don't know, your scenario. I don't know where you're going. I don't know what your investment life looks like, your age and things like that. There's a lot of factors that goes into giving investment advice. That's why anyone who knows what they're doing would not give investment advice just randomly or publicly. But that being said, if I was to lean towards one, I would say Bitcoin based on utility, gold based on recognition. And that's as of today. So as of today, I'll say if you want to use digital gold, if you want to use it daily, you can use it. And that's because we're the first to do this. So I know that Bitcoin will be used, and it's now being used, and will be used globally as well. It's there are a few villages at the moment that actually just accept Bitcoin. So it's going towards that direction. And banks and government know it's going towards that direction because they're now buying and holding as well. In fact, the US has got one of the largest buying deposits, I think, of gold at the moment. And they're not buying it because they think they want to monitor tax. They're buying it because they see that that's going to be the future. Yeah, and then we're in it as well because we see that's where our customers are gravitating towards. So I can tell you right now, from someone in there, Bitcoin is going there. Gold, on the other hand, just remains. It's been there for 2,500 years. It hasn't changed. It hasn't moved. I don't see it going anywhere. We'll see, But my argument is, I think it would be good to have gold as some sort of utility behind it. As long as both of them stay a store of value, they're going to be useless, and that's where I see it. Yes, so that's the only thing I'll advise against. I'll advise against people who treat gold and silver as as store of value, because the store of value means it can go up and down. People can play around with it. In fact, remember December 2025, depends on when you're watching this, Bitcoin rose up to 100,000, right? And people that were holding on to it were so happy. People were calling me up and going, see that? I'm glad I bought Bitcoin. I'm glad I got it. And then by January, February, it dropped down to 80,000, 75,000, in fact, 50,000 at one age. And they were disappointed. And I'm like, guys, that's exactly what I was trying to say. The idea of store of value is not for you. It's not for a retail investor, because it can be knocked out or wiped out depending on for governments, depending on institutional investors. They do what they want to do based on their balance sheets. That's going to impact you, because you're just sitting there and looking at your store of value and hoping that it goes up. And then when it goes down or drops in value, you do a mark to market, right? You compare it to what you spend and start worrying about how much you've lost, which is not good. That's not how to treat an investment. So if you're at that state, then worry about that, right? So that being said, I think there is that. Then the other point why I gravitate towards Bitcoin, the last point I'll say, is because of the amount in circulation. So Bitcoin is about 1.3 trillion in the world, 1.4 trillion in the world, Bitcoin. Gold is 35 trillion. I think I'll have a what do you call it? I think maybe our thumbnail is going to show the difference. So we see it, right? If you see that, then you know that Bitcoin still has a way to go. Because gold is a good 35 trillion. Bitcoin 1.3, 1.4 trillion in circulation. So that means in terms of value, that 1.3 is still going to rise to reach gold, because they're both seen as sovereign, both seen as stores of value. Okay, so that's where I see it, right? That Bitcoin still has some way to go. There is some growth room there, but should you use it as store of value? Should you use both as investments? I don't know. I'll have to study you and decide. So that's it for now. Thank you very much. I just wanted to learn some word on that, talk about it, since that's our field, that's where we are, and that's where we're going. Take care, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Stay safe, and order Orukka, Orukka, Orukka.com. We've got loads. We've got health rings, payment rings, everything to do with payments so that you don't need your phone or you don't need your wallet around anymore. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.